Hello, and welcome to statewide training for the Gear Assistance to Private Schools, or the GAPS program. My name is Lawrence Contero-Poltz, and along with my colleague Charlie Sears, we will be the presenters today for the GAPS application. Our contact phone numbers and emails are listed here in this slide if you'd like to contact us directly. This presentation is intended solely to provide general information and guidance to Texas LEAs, ESCs, and participating private schools, and reflects TEA's current understanding of statute and applicable federal guidance. The content of this presentation is subject to change and as a result of further potential information and guidance provided by federal agencies with regulatory oversight of these programs. This presentation does not constitute legal advice, and entities are therefore advised to seek legal counsel regarding the information and guidance provided in this presentation before acting on such information and guidance. Today's training will include website and resources, program overview, GAPS application overview, which will be a live demonstration, and information about Q&A session dates that are coming up soon. So one of the first things we want to talk about is just having information available regarding the actual program. Since this is a new program for our private nonprofit schools, we wanted to be sure that you had the link for our program website. And if you were by chance in the TEA's home page, you can hover over Finance and Grants and then click on Grants, and that'll take you into the section for the Gear Assistance to Private Schools. Our program website will also have information for schools that are interested in looking at the FAQs for the program, as well as a link in case you wanted to submit a question to our team for review. In addition to that, you can also email us directly at eanes@tea.texas.gov regarding any of the programs, including this GAPS program. So what are some highlights about this particular program that's new for our schools? It is a new program that was authorized by the Office of the Governor, OOG. TEA requested that ARP-EANS-2 funds that were not used under the original authorizing statute to be reverted to the Governor's Education Emergency Relief Program, or GEAR. The GAPS program utilizes the unused funds from the ARP-EANS-2 program. And with some exceptions, the requirements of the GAPS program are similar to the previous EANS programs. So some of the major differences for this program compared to the previous ones are listed below, and they include that the GAPS program removes the USDE requirement for meeting predetermined low-income percentage of students enrolled to be eligible for services, but preference will be given to applicant private schools with higher percentage of those low-income students or students from low-income families. In addition, GAPS removes the prohibition of Payroll Protection Program, or PPP, participation to be eligible for these services. So in previous applications and different programs, schools that received or participated in the PPP program were not eligible for EANS. However, for the GAPS program, if your school did receive and participate in the Payroll Protection Program, you are able to apply for the GAPS program. In addition, GAPS allows private schools to select allowable school safety activities that need to be implemented for students to feel safe and comfortable being on campus in order to improve student performance and close learning gaps created by the pandemic. This is a new category within the application that was not available in previous programs. And finally, the GAPS program removes reasonable transportation costs as a category from being an allowable expense due to student safety and liability concerns. Because GAPS utilizes the same funds that were available in the previous administration of the ARP-EANS-2 program, there is a provision for those schools that participate in the ARP-EANS-2 program. If your school is participating in the ARP-EANS-2 program, please note that on the application under Part D when asked. The application will then only allow schools to request services in the new category, which is school safety activities. We are providing this option to ensure that all eligible PMPs can receive assistance in this new category. Please note that for this particular program, it is strictly procurement only. It is similar to the ARP-EANS-2 program that also included procurement. Also, please note that a state education agency may not use GAPs to provide reimbursements to any non-public school for costs the school incurred to address the impact of COVID-19 emergency. So if your school incurs a cost, you're not able to request a reimbursement for this program. Also note that the contractor for the GAPS program to be announced, once they are determined, we will work closely with the PNPs to procure services and assistance for PNPs. So at this time, TEA has not yet determined who that party will be, but once it is, we will contact schools to let them know and at what date they can begin contacting that party. Other information to keep in mind about the GAPS program: authorization under discretion of the Office of the Governor using GEAR funds. And again, it should be assistance and services only, no reimbursements. TEA will administer the program statewide. And again, TEA will be working with a third-party contractor to implement the GAPS program activities and to provide assistance and services directly or via the third-party contractor. An eligible non-public school who applies for GAP services is not a recipient of federal financial assistance. The governor is a recipient of the award, and statute requires a public agency to control and administer the funds and to keep title to materials, equipment, or property purchased with this program funding. Unlike the Carissa Eanes 1 program, again, there are no reimbursements under this new program. Continued eligibility for schools. An eligible non-public school is an elementary or secondary school that is nonprofit, accredited, licensed, or otherwise operates in accordance with state law and was in existence prior to the March 13th, 2020 date, which is when COVID-19 was declared a national emergency. Next, we're going to review the GAPS timeline. So the application was released and open to schools on December the 6th. Next year, as of January 31st, 2023, that is going to be the application deadline. About a month later, on February 28th, 2023, that is going to be the last day for our team to review and process applications and make a decision. And then by March 15th of next year, funding allocations will be announced, again, on or before that date. And finally, the last day to receive services under this GAPS program will be September 30th, 2024. So some additional program requirements. TEA is required by statute to target and prioritize funding to private nonprofit schools who have a significant percent of low-income students or students from low-income families. In addition, we are also looking at PNPs who are most impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. However, schools with no low-income students may still apply, but we will be looking at those top two items as a priority for the program funding. Also note that services must be secular, neutral, and non-ideological. Additional program requirements. TEA cannot limit the services a PNP requests in the application. However, TEA may limit the services to be provided based on the total number of applications we receive and those services that the schools are requesting. PNPs may not receive and duplicate benefits from other programs such as ESSER 1 Equitable Services, Carissa Eanes 1, or even the ARP Eanes 2 program. So schools will be asked to certify that assistance or services being requested in the GAPS application have not already been applied for in these programs, ESSER 1, Carissa Eanes 1, or the ARP Eanes 2 application, if applicable to your school. PNPs that applied and received funding under these programs, again, ESSER 1, Carissa 1, and ARP Eanes 2 programs, are still eligible to apply and receive services under the GAPS program. When it comes to allowable services and assistance for this program, there is only one part or section of services and assistance available to schools. This area is called Part D, which are requests for procurement of services and assistance that will occur from April of next year, April 2023, through September 30th, 2024. Again, this is for procurement of services or assistance that's going to be provided by a contracted third-party provider. Once that party is determined, we will contact all eligible schools regarding that information. And again, also, it's worth repeating that there are no reimbursements for this particular GAPS program. So when it comes to what schools can request for this particular program, these are the different categories available to the schools. Whether you're a new or possibly a returning school, some of this might look familiar, more specifically to returning schools, on the different categories that they might have requested on the previous applications that they can also request in the GAPS procurement program. So it runs from, supplies to sanitize, PPE, improving ventilation systems, training and professional development, down all the way to initiating and maintaining education and support services. A key item to remember when it comes to comparison of this GAPS program to previous ones is that these categories no longer include reasonable transportation costs. In its place, instead, we have this new one, which is school safety activities that need to be implemented for students to feel safe and comfortable being on your campus so that they can improve their performance and close learning gaps created as a result of the pandemic. If you are a returning school that is participating in the ARP Institute program, and we currently have about 30 or so schools under ARP Institute, when you complete this program, this is the only category that will be available to your school to request for procurement in this specific program. Otherwise, if your school is not participating in the ARP Institute program, you can request services in all of these categories. So there are some unallowable assistance and services even for this program. They include sub-grants to schools, payroll to schools for staff or FTEs, costs for janitorial or cleaning services, but supplies are allowed, just not the actual cleaning service. Substitute teachers while the school teachers or PMP teachers are out with COVID-19, touchless items such as toilets, faucets, or something similar, permanent structures, permanent renovations or remodeling of existing school facilities. Reasonable transportation costs has been removed from this application, as well as any assistance or service determined not to be reasonable, necessary, or allowable under the GAPS program as determined by TEA. So what would the next steps be when it comes to this GAPS application? You want to complete this via the Smartsheet form, and the link will be included in a slide deck as part of this presentation. Our team has 30 days from the date of receiving the application to review and notify schools of the status. So what types of notifications will schools receive from our team? There are 3 listed here. Please keep in mind that this notification is the initial notification about your school's eligibility to participate in the program, whereas there's going to be a separate email notice for those eligible schools about the allocation approval amounts at a later time. So notifications your school may receive from our TEA team include negotiations for clarification or additional information we need from your school. It could be the confirmation of approved services and assistance, or it could be a rejected application, which is going to include reasons for the ineligibility for this GAPS program. And again, service allocations will be published on or before March 15th of next year in the GAPS website. Please also remember that this is not serving as a notice of a grant award. Schools can begin to request procurement of services and assistance for the GAPS program through TEA's contracted third-party provider on or after April 2023. And again, we ask that you not reach out to any contracted third parties until on or after this date. GAPS program allocations, again, will be posted on the GAPS program website, and you can click it here in order to get to that website. It should be done on or before March 15th of next year. Amounts for the allocations will be weighted based on the following: low-income student percentages, the source of low-income data that your school uses, as well as the weight of all submitted and approved school applications. So an additional step that's going to be involved with this application involves data. So low-income data may be randomly validated by TEA for accuracy and compliance. If the data provided by your school in the application is not sustained by the documentation actually provided to TEA, the school will not become ineligible for the program. However, your percentage of students from low-income households might be affected, and the formula will account for these differences. So when it comes to the documentation, and this is going to be in Part E of the GAPS application, all applicants must provide documentation to sustain your low-income student count. Please keep in mind, this is for schools that actually have low-income students. As I mentioned earlier, there may be a possibility that we have schools that are applying for the GAPS program that don't have any low-income students. Those schools are welcome to apply and submit this application. But if you do have low-income students, you must follow this documentation process. The documentation must not contain PII or personally identifiable information of the students or their families. So you will need to redact or remove that information. Failure to properly redact PII will cause the documentation to be returned, and the PNP will be asked to provide documentation to complete the request for services. Based on TEA's general counsel, we will actually not return the documentation. We will just simply purge it from our system, and we will contact you with additional steps on providing us the correct documentation, redacting PII. So what are the things we're asking for when it comes to the documentation? Documentation should be in PDF format. And again, it must not include PII. Your documentation must include total student enrollment roster for the 2019-2020 school year. Even though we're now in a different year, 2022, and we're going into 2023 soon, enrollment rosters and information for this program must be for 2019-2020 school year. If your school selected the scholarship as its low-income data source in Part C, you must include a roster that clearly identifies low-income students, their family size, and the household income information, again, for the 2019-2020 school year. And when we're referencing low-income students, those are the same thing as students from low-income families, so we use them interchangeably. And so what are the low-income data sources from the GAPS application? They include free or reduced price lunch data, scholarship or financial assistance data, E-rate data, proportionality data, or other relevant data if it's not already listed on the ones above this. So we're going to give you some examples or suggested documentation depending on which data source you select. So when it comes to the free or reduced price lunch data source, if that is what your school is using, what we expect from your school is going to be your school's NSLP National Student Lunch Program 2020-2021 site application that is completed as an official application. The reason we're asking for the 2020-2021 NSLP site application is because that application for that year actually provides us enrollment for the prior 2019-2020 school year information. If your school selects E-rate as its data source, you will need to provide us FCC Form 471 for the funding year 2019. If your school selects scholarship data, this is a little different because there are so many different schools that are applying for this program, and there is no consistency necessarily on the scholarships that schools are giving to their students. So what we're going to ask for is, again, is if you select scholarship data, this is the information you'll need to provide to TEA as part of the GAPS application. One blank scholarship application, again, specific to your school, then 5 or more student family completed scholarship applications for student households who meet the FRPL low-income guidelines. Again, these are going to be students from low-income families. Excuse me. In addition to that, for scholarship data, we also will need completed official 2019 tax returns that are either signed or officially filed. When it comes to scholarship data, there is a possibility that your school may have used information for students or families that are under CHIP or participating under the CHIP or SNAP programs. If they are participating in those programs, your school can certainly provide us completed documentation for those programs as part of your supporting documentation for the GAPS application. When it comes to proportionality, it's good to revisit what that actually means. So it's first good to know that when it comes to proportionality, this is what we're referencing. You want to apply the low-income percentage of each participating Title I public school attendance area to the number of private school children who reside in that school attendance area to derive the number of private school children from low-income families. To do this, you will need the address, grade levels, and ages of those students attending private schools. Again, we're looking for the identification of low-income students. Please note that we are not asking you to submit student addresses in any documentation, as that is considered PII. So we've got some additional resources if your school has selected or will be using the free or reduced price lunch school data or the E-rate data. In both of these instances, for FRPL, there is a portal where our schools can go to. You can click on this link, or you can also contact them directly to help get the information needed to provide in your application. Or if you use E-rate, again, there is a website here, and it gives you a couple of steps on what you'll be needing to do in order to get to the right area to look for the specific form that we mentioned earlier in this training. When it comes to scholarships, again, because schools have different scholarship applications and different information they're requesting from their families and students, these are some of the examples we've learned in the past from what schools have been able to or can provide to TEA. We know that some schools use a third-party provider such as FACS, formerly known as RenWeb, and you can certainly contact them in order to get the information and to submit directly to TEA. And again, it must come from your school, not from that particular party. So if you by chance work with and use FACS or RenWeb, you want to request the financial summary ensuring that PII has been redacted. While TEA will accept documentation from third-party vendors to provide that information, but for the documentation purposes, we are not recommending any specific software service or vendor for the supporting documentation. Things to keep in mind when it comes to this data is the data must confirm, again, household size and income information for low-income students or students from low-income families. What is not needed is a school list of scholarship recipients, which are not necessarily free or reduced price lunch eligible students or students from low-income families. TEA, again, does not recommend any specific software or service for scholarship data preservation, but records must be kept for each scholarship student's household size and household income information. So as far as the documentations of examples we've talked about earlier, there should be some consistency when it comes to submitting that as part of your application. We want to make sure that you're collecting the information ahead of time. Check and double check that there is no PII. That could just easily mean you print out the documents, take a black marker or something that crosses it out and it's not at all legible. And that you scan all the documents together as one PDF. If by chance you're using a third-party provider, typically those providers can more quickly and easily redact the information as so long as they know what documentation, what PII has to be removed. We're asking that multiple attachments be avoided because that's going to help keep track of your documentation. It also prevents discrepancies if your document requires resubmission, especially when it comes to schools that try to submit several documents. There may be an instance where only one or two documents have PII. Those are the ones we're going to purge from our system and we'll have to have your school resubmit them. On the flip side, we've actually had schools who submitted a lot of attachments and a smattering of them did have PII. So we had to just go ahead and purge all of the documentation, reach out to the school and say, we need you to go back and remove PII and resubmit all of those files. So if you can, please make every effort to submit everything as one PDF because it's going to certainly help us review and make a decision for your school as soon as possible. So here are some of the more commonly identified, personally identifiable or information PII for the documents that your school is going to be submitting for the GAPS application. No names, which this includes first and last names or names of places of employment. That also would mean initials. I'm Lawrence Contero Polt. So in the example of a roster with a student name, it shouldn't have LRC or even El Contero. All of that has to be redacted, removed. No personal numbers, whether it's an ID number, birth dates, socials, or phone numbers. Grade levels are acceptable. When we're talking about student ID numbers, you shouldn't have any type of label in the column that says it's a student ID, even if it is computer generated. So whether your school generates an ID number or it's been generated by your third-party provider, those numbers do have to be removed or redacted. Again, please make sure there are no addresses, occupations, jobs, or employers, or any other information that is directly related to a student. Please keep in mind that it is possible your school is going to be submitting to us a fairly blank document. We want to be sure we have documentation that, in one example, when you submit the application for confirmation of the total number of students that you have for the 2019-20 school year, that we can easily count, see all the different lines, for the number of students you reported for your total student enrollment. In addition to that, we also want to be sure we see information for low-income students or students from low-income families, which we can easily count and be able to easily see the household size and their income information. When we receive this documentation, especially for scholarships, this is the information or the guidelines we will be using again for 2019-2020, which is in free reduced price lunch criteria. So next, my colleague Charlie Sears will go through a live demonstration of the GAPS application. We are here providing you a link to this, which is a Smartsheet form. Click on it, it'll take you to the live application. We do recommend you use Google Chrome as the browser. Please note on your calendar that applications will close and you won't be able to submit after January 31st, 2023 by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you encounter any technical issues or problems with your application, please reach out to us at eames@tea.texas.gov. That could involve any changes. If there are any errors that were submitted and you realize after the fact that that happened, reach out to us. We can certainly work with you and identify if that's something that we can have you go through and resubmit the application. If there's an instance where your school is approved to resubmit your application, note that it's going to push back your application review to the most recently submitted date because we will purge or delete from the system your prior application. Again, no applications are going to be reviewed or accepted after the January 31st, 2023 deadline.
Thank you, Lawrence. Now we are going to have a live demonstration of submitting a GAPS application. So we're just going to go through the application. It is on the Smartsheet website and there's a link provided. So we're going to look at that. All right, this is the GAPS application. All the program information is listed at the top here. Lawrence has already gone over most of that information. Please definitely reread it before you start submitting your application. I'm not going to go over that currently because it's mentioned elsewhere in this presentation. Part A, School PNP Contact and Application Entity Information. So eligible PNP school or consortium fiscal agent. So eligible PNP school is going to be your school name. A lot of PNPs or schools unfortunately accidentally put their personal names here or the name of the principal here. This is the name of your school. So you're going to come up with, you're going to put in your name of your school here. So I'm just going to make up one here today. We're just going to call it Cool School. What is the mailing address for Cool School? It is 123 Cool Street. I'm just going to make up a town here and put in the correct zip code. Name of authorized representative. You obviously put the person who will be your authorized representative here. This sometimes might not be the person filling this out. Maybe the authorized rep will be the principal, but you have a fiscal agent or some kind of receptionist filling this out. That would be fine. But we want the name of the authorized rep here. Who's going to be the kind of point person that we will reach out to. I'm going to make up a name here. Alan Admin, because he's an administrator, Alan. The email of Alan Admin is alan.admin@coolschool.org. I'm just going to make up a phone number here, but it is checking to make sure this is a real phone number. So make sure that you enter in a 10-digit number here so that will go through that quality check. Applicant entry. So is this application for one eligible PNP school or for a consortium of schools? So if you are a consortium of schools or a diocese and you want to represent multiple schools, you're going to check this one. But overwhelmingly, our past applications have just been single school entries. And if you're not sure about this, please reach out to us and we're happy to help. Part B, PNP eligibility assurances and program certification. So every one of these will need to be a yes for this application to continue. If one of these is a no, you're likely not going to qualify as a GAPS participating school. Make sure you read this eligibility assurances. The first one here is the school PNP requesting services or assistance is a nonprofit school. So you have to check yes here. If your school is not a nonprofit school, you will check no, and you will not be eligible for this program. The school PNP requesting services or assistance is accredited, licensed, or otherwise approved to operate in accordance with Texas state law. That should also be a yes. PNP eligibility assurance 3. The school requesting services or assistance existed or operated prior to March 13th, 2020. That's when the COVID-19 pandemic was announced. All services or assistance for which I'm requesting support would be secular, neutral, and non-ideological. This is your school's assurance that all the things you're requesting are secular, neutral, and non-ideological. Part C, this part, definitely you'll need to do some research beforehand to know what your low impact student counts are. So make sure that you have that ready to go when you get to this section. We are requesting this information. Your school, regardless of low income student percentage, should be eligible for this program. There's not a threshold like there was for EANS 2. So please just be honest and give us the information that we are requesting in Part E, which is a portion of the training that we have already gone over. Low-income student data. So you're going to want to write the total student enrollment for 2019-20 at Cool School. We had 100 students. We had 100 students for 2019-20. So I'm just going to put 100 there. Total low income student enrollment 19-20. So I did a exhaustive search of all of my student records and I was able to find some information to identify 10 low income students. Maybe at first I thought it was something else, but if it changes, it's okay. We just need to know the appropriate data from 2019-20. This is something that we need to have. Low income data source. The way that I got that was from my scholarship data. Our school is a scholarship school. If you are any of these other possibilities, you can write about that. But for my pretend school, Cool School, we're going to be a scholarship school. And there's more information in that in the section of the training explaining Part E of this application. We have a whole section of the training talking about this kind of validation piece. So we'll go deeper into that. COVID-19 impact. My school lost income revenue other than tuition, and it also lost tuition revenue as a result of a decrease in enrollment. Any of these that apply to your school, definitely check, because we want to know how COVID-19 affected your school. This is a very important check for our application here. Part D, school PNP services or assistance requested. So this is going to be the section where you talk about how much in each category your school is going to request for financial assistance or services. Did your school participate and receive funds under the EANS 2 program? So this section right here opens up one or two sections. If you say yes, it only opens up one category for you to request funds in, which is the new school safety category. And if you select no, the whole application is open to you. You can ask for or request funds in a lot of different categories. I'm going to say that Cool School did not participate in EANS 2 program. Definitely make sure you find out the answer to this question if your school is an EANS 2 school or not. If you're not sure, you can reach out to us. or you can contact someone on your campus to see if they know if you're an Eames 2 school. If you answer incorrectly, we will find out. So definitely make sure you please find that out and to help us out so we don't have to check it on the back end. Supplies to sanitize, disinfect, and clean school facilities. I'm just going to kind of make up some numbers here. You will have to decide what's best for your school in order to make the best requests here on this section. But I'm just going to say we need $500 worth of cleaning materials, PPE. I'm just going to say this school needs 0 at this time, because I know I've heard a lot of schools have a lot of donated items, donated masks, donated gloves. Improving ventilation systems, including windows or portable air purification systems. We've got a lot of great examples of what you can request here, which is new to this application, and we're very proud of that. So I'm going to say we need about $2,000 worth of air purification, maybe by a few air purifiers. Training and professional development for all staff on sanitation, use of PPE. Let's say our staff needs a new training, and we did some research and it was going to be about $500 to have someone come out and train our staff on how to use that. So that's what I'll put in there. Physical barriers to facilitate social distancing. Our school still has a lot of that stuff, so we're going to put a 0 here. Again, you have to think about what your school actually needs and what you're going to want to request. Other materials, supplies, or equipment recommended by the CDC. Let's say we want some more, forehead thermometers or trash bags, filters for air purifiers. Let's say I need about $1,000 worth of materials in that category. Expanding the capacity to administer the coronavirus testing. There's been a jump in cases in our county, so we're thinking about bringing on some more help to administer testing. So we're gonna put a pretty significant amount in here. Let's say $5,000, because we did some research on who we can hire and how often they'll come, and that is about the price that we were quoted. Educational technology. Our school hasn't gotten a lot of educational technology. We got a little bump at the beginning, but we need way more. So this is going to be a really important category for us. So we're going to put $10,000 in here. Again, these are all numbers that I'm making up at this time, but you should do a lot of research to find out what's best for your school. Redeveloping instructional plans. So this is where you will do some trainings with your teachers to give them additional educational resources and tools to help students who are struggling as a result of the pandemic. So this is a pretty important category and can be a high dollar category based on how many trainings you want to do. So I'm going to say our school wants $5,000 in this category. Leasing sites or spaces. Our school is pretty big, so we are going to put a 0 in this category at this time. Initiating or maintaining educational support. Again, this is a really important category to discuss with all the leaders at your school to see what kind of staff you might need or extra help you might need. Anyone that could be added to your staff here would obviously be a third-party contractor. It would not be someone who technically works for your school, but they would work on your campus. And they would be subject to fingerprinting and some other requirements that is required by the federal government. So let's say we do want to hire a couple people. So this is going to be a pretty expensive category. So we're going to put $80,000 in here in this one, because maybe we're trying to hire a couple people. Maybe we're trying to hire a couple teachers' aides or one teacher's aide and one counselor, and we know about how much that's going to cost. And then finally, this is the new category, which is the school safety settings. Our school only has 100 students, and it's kind of a self-contained kind of campus, so we don't think we'll need that much money on this, but there are some things in here we're interested in. So we did some research, and we're going to use about $5,000 in this category. And then for this one, you actually have to tell us what kind of activities you're thinking about doing. So I'm interested in some removable security cameras and some school safety and security training and planning. That's what we're interested in at our school, because we did We did a safety audit, and we also talked to all the stakeholders, all the teachers, group of students, and this is what we've decided is the best way forward for us. Again, I'm pretending to be a school here, thinking about how much to put in each one of these categories based on what our needs are. And this is part E. We went much deeper into part E earlier, and I'm not going to go deep into this at all at this time. You should collect all of your information, put it in one big PDF, and then you're going to drop it in here. And this is where you're going to prove how many low-income students you have. Remember, I said we had 10 low-income students, so I'm really not pulling together that much information for just those 10 students. But we do need all the things that we talked about during that section of the training that Lawrence went over. I'm going to just drag and drop this file that isn't really a file that has that information in it, but I'm just going to kind of show you the process. You can just drag and drop a file right here, or you can click this browse files and search through your computer to find it. We do need something attached to this if you are claiming you had any low-income students during the 2019-20 school year. So something needs to be attached here for this to go through your whole application. And then name of authorized individual, I'm Alan Admin. I am the head of school. I'm going to give myself that title here. And final program information prior to submission. Thank you for completing the GAPS program request for services. Scroll up or down or review and or edit the application prior to submission to TEA. Please definitely make sure you do that, because these things have sliders, and you'll see, look, I just moved it, and the sliders go up and down, and they'll change your numbers. I went down to -1 and -2 there. So make sure you definitely check through your application before you hit submit. It's very, very important. TEA recommends the P&P select send me a copy of my responses option prior to application submission to ensure they receive a copy of their responses. This is your documentation of having submitted the request form. We will potentially get you this form in the future, but this is your best way to have a record that you submitted this to us. So definitely make sure you check this button, send me a copy of my responses. So I'm definitely going to check that, and then click the submit button to send your application to TEA. Applications received on or before the submission deadline will be reviewed and responded to within the 30-day review period based on the TEA recorded date of application. Funding allocations for the GAPS program were made public on or before March 15th, 2023 on the TEA GAPS program website. Awesome. So I'm going to put Alan Admin here at coolschool.org. And I'm going to get myself sent these responses here. And then you should receive this screen here, and that shows us that you are completed. I'm going to toss it back over to Lawrence. Thank you guys for viewing this live tutorial.
So now that my colleague Charlie Sears has completed the demo of the live application, here are some application reminders and tips. Schools are responsible for saving a copy of their completed application. So in the application at the very end, make sure you click on that checkbox for sending and include your email or your authorized representative's email. I do recommend that whoever that individual is that's going to get the copy of the responses, that they share it with everyone on their campus, any campus partner that's going to work with the EANS program, so that everybody's on the same page and has the same information that was submitted for this program specific to your school. Make sure you're checking your inbox, possibly in spam or junk, for an email coming from forms@app.smartsheet.com to ensure you receive your responses if you selected to get a copy of them. There's only one authorized representative for each P&P. Again, plan ahead for the January 31st application deadline. We are going to be processing applications in the order received based on the recorded submission date. One key item to note, again, as a reminder, as we mentioned before, is that this is a program strictly through procurement, And as a result of that, when schools begin submitting the request for these services and assistance in April of 2023, you should account for additional time for those services or assistance to be procured for your school or sent to your school. It will take additional time for those services to actually begin or reach your school for this particular program. So again, here's our timeline for the program. The application is currently open. It closes January 31st of next year. Final date for TEA's team to approve all these GAPS applications is going to be February 28th. And by March 15th of next year, that is a day or on or before that we will announce allocation amounts of services for those eligible PMPs. April of next year is when approved schools will begin to receive service and requesting them, if not before, from the contracted public entity selected by TEA. Note that the contracted public entity will be following statewide procurement processes, and as a result, it will be no earlier than this date. And a final reminder that September 30th, 2024 is the last date for program funding under the GAPS program. Our team will also have Q&A sessions. These sessions are going to be available to schools to come in and ask any questions regarding the application or possibly even the documentation that your school might be using as far as its low-income data source. So these are the links provided in the slide deck. You can register for them on the webpage as well. They're currently out there. And once you register, you will receive a link for the actual registration date and time. Again, this is going to be Q&A sessions only. This is not a time for our team to be providing training on the applications. We're going to be available to answer questions for you on these 3 dates, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, which are the 14th, 15th, and 16th of December. We have a couple of afternoon times from 3 to 4, and we also have a morning time on Thursday, December the 15th. You can certainly come to all 3 of them. If you are not able to make time for this training and don't see it by the 14th, you can certainly come in the 15th. And if you decide you have additional questions, you may still come and visit with us on the 16th from 3 to 4 p.m. Keep in mind, if you miss these training dates for Q&As, you're also very welcome to contact us at any time at eanes@tea.texas.gov, both for this GAPS program or for the previous EANS program. We thank you very much for your interest in this program, and we look forward to assisting you and helping your students. Thank you.